Audience discretion is advised due to potentially distressing and sensitive material. It's around 9 p.m. The Ring cameras show someone wearing gloves wandering around the property. When he comes into view, he covers the camera, and when the camera senses no motion, it shuts down. He jumps over the fence into the yard. He then slowly proceeds towards the French doors of the house and breaks in. He cuts himself on the glass but doesn't even realize. That is how laser focused he is. The house seems dark and empty. He seems to know exactly where her room is. He walks into her room and finds it empty. He then lies down on her bed and waits for her, for a while. 4 hours later, she arrives home, having no idea what is lying in wait for her. It's around 1 a.m. on February 15, 2020. She's been celebrating Valentine's with her closest friends. She walks into her room and is in a state of utter shock, disbelief, and fear. She just knew in her bones this would finally happen. Michael Herman, her roommate, calls 911 and asks for help. When the police show up on the scene, Herman explains that he's her roommate and has been locked out but knows for a fact that she's been hurt because he's heard her scream. He had blood on his shirt, so it wasn't obvious whether he was a suspect or a witness, if he was part of the problem or the solution.
I heard it, she's screaming, she's thrown to the ground. I couldn't find my phone, I couldn't find anything.
Okay, hold on. Okay, so you have access to here?
No.
Is there anybody else inside the house?
My roommate.
Just your roommate by yourself?
Yes. You didn't check on her? Dude, I heard screaming. I don't know if that guy had a gun or a knife. I came running I couldn't find my phone or
So is there somebody else inside?
Yes. So I think there's
Okay, sir, do me a favor. Do me a favor. Calm down. Calm down. Other than your roommate, is there anybody else inside the house?
I don't know. I don't know.
So you didn't see anyone?
No, I just heard her screaming.
Have you called?
I just got thrown to the ground. I've been calling for her through his windows. Nobody's answering. Nothing.
Yeah, let's get an additional unit.
It's not building search.
Yeah, I know, but...
I mean, we can if you want.
Yeah,
but we're going to go in there.
Yeah, I know. 615, can I get an additional unit for some of this?
I have my keys in there.
Is requesting additional unit 2086 Mount Street.
You can't open it, so you were essentially locked out. Yes. I can hop the fence, but my keys were left in the house. I was in the middle of sleep.
So why is this? Why can't we get in here?
Because it's locked. Because she came home and
listen, sir. You need to relax a little bit so that we can get all the information, okay?
Okay.
So how are we going to get it? How are you planning on getting back in here?
I don't know. I guess hopping the fence and getting my keys.
Let me stop it right there.
I hopped the fence and I cut myself on that. I couldn't find, I'm in the middle of sleep. I don't know how many people are in there. I don't know if he's got a weapon or what. I'm trying to knock on neighbors' doors. Nobody's answering. I don't have a phone. He was walking by and I had...
Take some deep breaths from me, all right? Relax.
We don't have a lot of time.
you left all your stuff in there, but I'm supposed to get in.
Well, sir, so how are we supposed to gain entry into this place?
I guess hop the fence with me. We'll go around back. The back door's open. Let's go.
After the first responders finally find their way in, they find her. She's lying on the ground in critical condition, although still alive. She's unconscious. She dies at the hospital within hours. Interrogating Herman, he explains that he'd been sleeping in his downstairs bedroom when he heard something fall and assumed it was her cat, and kept nodding on and off. But he finally was wide awake when he heard her blood-curdling scream, being thrown to the floor, and the sound of her choking. He starts frantically looking for his phone but is unable to find it. He doesn't know what's going on upstairs and thinks it might be an intruder, so he starts shouting her name in an attempt to scare the intruder away, but that doesn't seem to work, and he shares that it was a really hard decision for him to leave her behind to find someone to help them. Trying to find some help for his friend, he gets out of the house through climbing the gate and cuts himself on spike rods and runs to the neighbors to find the phone and call the police, but they don't open the door. He finally finds a stranger on the street and uses their phone to make the 911 call. During the whole time, feeling like a lot of time has passed and he's already too late to save her. But why wasn't there any signs of a break-in? At this point, the police are just wondering, did he do it? Did they have a fight? Perhaps some bad blood between the roommates? Not the first time that's happened. In the light of day, investigators, upon further search of the crime scene, find the broken French doors and their point of entry. They also find her phone on the bed and her purse, jacket, and broken necklace on the floor, and signs of a struggle that took place in her room on the 3rd floor. She'd been thrown off the balcony. There was also a syringe containing some sort of yellowish-brown liquid. Still, investigators were not positive if this was a crime scene. They believed there were still 4 possibilities: an accident, suicide, some kind of drug deal, or maybe she was just using drugs and accidentally fell to her death after finding that the liquid in the syringe was actually heroin. Although her roommate Herman insisted that Amie was sober and didn't even drink. Herman also quickly points his finger at her ex, and investigators turn to her friends for answers. Regarding his experience that night, Herman later stated, quote, "I remember thinking, like, this is so much worse than any horror movie I've ever seen," end quote. Robert Cosland was Amie's best friend. He didn't waste any time telling investigators that Amie's ex, Gareth, is responsible for her death. And yes, in case you were wondering, this is the story of Amie Harwick. Amie Nicole Harwick was born on May 20, 1981. Penny and Tom Harwick adopted her when she was only 11 months old. Her mother remembers it like it was yesterday. Quote, "It was kind of like a fairy tale. Here's this beautiful little girl sitting there, and she's going to come home with us and be our daughter. It was wonderful," end quote. Amie had a head full of honey-colored curls when adopted, which went really dark by the time she was 4. Around the same time, they adopted another baby, a boy, who was named Chris. After finishing high school, Amie met Tommy Decker at a local concert. He was a drummer from LA, which forced the couple to start a long-distance relationship. After a while, Amie decided to move to LA to follow her dreams, and she did so in 2001. She was only 20 years old, so ambitious, so full of life. Soon thereafter, the couple tied the knot, but the marriage only lasted 3 years and Amie and Tommy got divorced. But then, she met Gareth Pershouse in 2009. Amie was working as a model and dancer and ran into Pershouse often at different flashy LA events and parties. He was charming, goofy, and dorky. He was also a computer expert and an aspiring comedian. But other than these, Amie avoided sharing much more about him with her family. Digging into their past together as a couple, the police found how volatile their short-lived relationship really was. It was only 18 months. Apparently, a number of police reports had been made in which Amie had claimed multiple occasions where Pershouse had choked, suffocated, and punched her with a closed fist, and she even took pictures of said injuries to back up her claims. Amie was so concerned that she even took out a restraining order in 2012 following their breakup, which wasn't much help. A friend of Amie's, Rudy Torres, even stated that he repetitively asked and told him to let her go, to leave her alone, but he wouldn't take no for an answer, and just simply cut him off after a while. In the aftermath of their breakup, there were multiple incidents which made Amie feel even more unprotected and vulnerable. For example, her house was broken into. On one such occasion, only her personal photos had been taken, and in another, her computer was wiped clean. Mind that this is apparently Pershouse's MO, breaking in. Plus, he was a computer geek. There was no way of proving it, but Amie just knew it was him messing with her head. In another, more evil incident, he even got Amie fired from a youth counselor job after a prospective employer was sent anonymous nude photos of her. But either way, Amie was thriving in LA. During all these years of turmoil and tension, Amie worked as a Playboy model and dance performer to pay for her post-secondary education. She then went on to study psychology at California State Polytechnic University and earned her master's degree from Pepperdine University in clinical psychology and a PhD from the non-accredited Institute for Advanced Study of Human Sexuality, and shortly became a licensed marriage and family therapist. Not only did she put herself through school and earn her PhD, but she was also a very well-known therapist in West Hollywood, specializing in family and sex counseling. She was the author of the book The New Sex Bible for Women, The Complete Guide to Sexual Self-Awareness and Intimacy, and regularly appeared on different podcasts, on TV, and even had her own YouTube channel on which she discussed her work as a sex therapist.
Hi, this is Dr. Amie Harwick, and today this video is going to be all about what is a sex therapist. I get this question all the time. People don't know what I do, or they have all these misconceptions about what sex therapy is. So right now I'm going to break it down and tell you what it is I do and what it is a sex therapist does. Years ago when I was in graduate school, my mom and I were on the phone. I said, Mom, I think I'm going to specialize in sex therapy. I'm going to be a sex therapist. And she said, does that mean you're going to have sex with people? And I thought at that moment, even my mom, who's an educated woman, had no idea what it is that I do for a living, no idea what it is that I do or that I want to do. So I had to clarify with her, no, Mom, that means that I'm going to be a therapist, but I'm also going to work in the area of sexuality and be more sex positive. And she still was a bit confused, but supported me. So because of that situation, I thought it's very important for me to make this video and tell you about these misconceptions about what a sex therapist does, and also break it down on what it is I actually do.
The most interesting thing she did, sadly towards the end of her life, was that she started working with Pineapple Support, which is an organization for sex work positive mental health professionals, which supported sex workers in addition to battered women and victims of domestic abuse. And you can tell why she chose this line of work based on what's been said so far. Because of this, she was called a positive force in the world and an unapologetic champion of women by Drew Carey, host of The Price is Right, who she met in 2017 at a party. Within a year, Carey, through Instagram and the caption "The Face of a Lottery Winner," announced their engagement. The couple called it quits in 2018 amicably, though it is said that the reason for their breakup was Amie's fear of who was watching a famous person holding her hand and prancing her around in the world. Now let's fast forward to 2 years later. Amie, after almost 10 years of not seeing her abuser, is trying to live her life as a therapist and shining brighter than ever. It's a fancy event and Amie walks onto the red carpet. Amie is smiling and posing for the pictures and enjoying her status and the life she's built for herself. And suddenly, a familiar and yet the most terrifying voice comes from behind her. She swings around and finds Per's house behind her. He's scheduled to take photographs at the same event, and the two come face to face after almost 10 years of successfully not seeing one another. That night, after an hour of talking to Per's house, Amie goes back to the comfort of her own home and writes an email to herself. Maybe as proof, maybe as a reminder, or maybe just the habit of documenting what he's done to her, like all the times he left bruises on her while choking and punching her. She writes, quote, "Tonight I felt very scared. It terrifies me that he's been obsessed with me for 9 years. Thinks about me every day. Gareth came up behind me and started screaming, 'Why are you here?' He was sobbing. His head was in his hands. He was hyperventilating. He was distorting his face up and shaking violently." She continues, "He couldn't stop obsessing over me. He recited text messages that I had sent about 9 years ago, recited the date, who they were to, and exactly what they said word for word. I couldn't believe it. I was very scared. I'm pretty nervous that I'm more on his radar now. He's focused on harming me. I'm hoping that this interaction and listening and giving him time may cause a neutralization on his anger towards me." Later, she told her mom Penny, quote, "He called me a bitch and that I ruined his life," end quote. And then she said, "Mom, I went into therapist mode. I just tried to calm him down. She was so scared," her mom continued. The very next day, he found Amie's phone number on the internet and starts texting her. He bombards her with messages and leaves a tear-filled voicemail saying, "I have so much to say. Please just give me a chance to just say it. Please," crying, "please." And Amie blocked his number. Referring to Amie's email to herself, which her friend Robert found 2 months after his friend's murder, Detective Scott Masterson said, quote, "That's the closest we've ever had to a victim testifying in their murder. I thought it was extremely devastating." After talking to Pershouse for an hour, Amie began looking into increasing security, like installing surveillance cameras, purchasing a pepper spray, and sharing location with her friend Robert at all times. She even expressed that since he had not exhibited any violent behavior at the award ceremony, she didn't think the police could or would do anything or issue another restraining order against him, so she never bothered. But she told Robert, quote, "Look, if something happens to me, he did it," end quote. And Amie was right. The moment she walked into her room in the early hours of February 15th, she froze in shock, and it is assumed that she threw her phone at him because she had nothing to protect herself with. She then turned around in an attempt to run away from him. She's screaming, and they are fighting. Amie's fighting tooth and nail to get out of the situation. But then a miscalculation on Pershouse's part occurs. He hears her roommate screaming her name from underneath. So instead of going on as he planned, which is inject her with the liquid he's brought along, he starts choking her and throws her off the 3rd floor balcony. The liquid was liquid nicotine, which is a toxic poison that if injected may not be detected. Then he hops back over the fence and flees the scene. An autopsy found Amie died from blunt force injuries of the head and the torso with evidence of manual strangulation. Within 13 hours of Amie's murder, Pershouse is arrested on suspicion of murder. He plays the old and so obvious game of, "What happened? What do you want to talk about? What's this about? Oh yeah, I know, Amie." But the police just don't buy it. One of the reasons being his black eye and a bite mark on his bicep, which he blamed on an accident during his home renovation. 3 years after Amie's death, Gareth Pershouse went on trial, and Amie's parents, Tom and Penny, along with all her friends, sat through every single second wanting to be there for Amie. The defense claimed that seeing Amie at the award ceremony sent Pershouse into, quote, "a deep, debilitating depression," and he only wanted to see Amie on Valentine's to talk. As for the nicotine-filled syringe, they stated that it was meant for Pershouse himself and not Amie. Apparently, his plan was to commit suicide that night, not to murder Amie. Just like Amie's family and friends, you might wonder, then what about the gloves? What about him covering the cameras and trying to stay hidden from them? Well, the prosecution brought up the same things. Then the defense claimed that Amie may have attacked Pershouse because she was scared, which again made zero sense to the prosecution. Why would a 115-pound lady intentionally get into a physical fight with a 230-pound man who she was afraid of and was running from for almost 10 years? You guessed it right. No matter what the defense said, they couldn't quite make Pershouse's stories make sense to anyone, and he was found guilty of the crime of murder in the 1st degree and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He did not utter a word, although he had plenty to say prior to his sentencing. There was a jail tape conversation between him and his friends in which Pershouse said, quote, "I guess I'm officially a bad boy now, right? I've always been kind of," end quote, then laughs. In his voice, there is no concern for Amie's life and her friends and family. He's just laughing about it with his friends weeks after murdering a human being. And the sad thing is, at this point, when he laughs her murder off, you can see why she was so scared of such a callous man. You can see how sad it is that Amie met with a handyman before she was murdered and told him specifically that they needed to do something to secure the French doors, which were Pershouse's point of entry. How on some level she knew the mind of her murderer. After the verdict was read, Robert, Amie's friend, said, quote, "Justice was rendered, and that's good, but we shouldn't be here at all. This should have never happened to begin with. The hole in our lives remains, end quote. Her mom, visiting her grave, talks to her daughter, quote, I couldn't get a brighter orange. I know orange was your favorite color, but this is the closest I could get, end quote, which made me cry the first time I read this. Her mother says, quote, we're not the same people we were before, but we keep trying to be, end quote. Her friends say she became a therapist and relationship advisor because of her personal experience. She's been described as an outspoken advocate and champion for women. Her brother Chris described her as an interesting character, saying she was into heavy metal and rock music, went to a lot of concerts, and even got her parents in on the action. She would even manage to get backstage and meet the performers. Drew Carey described her as obviously beautiful, really smart, and someone who just wanted to help people. After her death, a petition was created to rewrite California's domestic violence laws, which included a statute preventing restraining orders from expiring. In the beginning of this case, you may have felt that this was a tad much after 10 years of being apart from her abuser, but make no mistake, abusers never let go. Stay safe, take care of yourself. If you are being abused or have been abused and are living in fear, let someone know. Call a hotline, ask for help, voice it.